The Supreme Court's conservative majority has just allowed cities to criminalize the act of being homeless. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that unhoused people will be able to be arrested and fined for sleeping in public spaces. The decision overturns a lower court's ruling that said that enforcing camping bans when shelter is lacking is equal to cruel and unusual punishment. Now, right there, a couple of key phrases, right? For one, cruel and unusual punishment. We'll get to that. But first, lacking shelter, meaning they've got nowhere else to go. Where are they going to sleep? This is not about somebody who chooses not to go to the shelter for various reasons. Many of them actually pretty understandable. For one, curfews, rules against bringing pets, rampant theft, possible sexual abuse, having to abandon all of your possessions to then, of course, those possessions get thrown away, things that you might need, clothes, anything that you might have been able to take from a place that you previously lived with you, all that gets abandoned for one night in a shelter, okay? And by the way, a lot of these shelters are only a few nights, maybe even a maximum of allowing you to stay for a month, and then you're back out on the street. So there you go. These are people that have no other option but the street, and now, unfortunately, because of the Supreme Court, they're going to be able to be put into the prison system, which, by the way, will then allow the state to use them as a free labor force. Do you see why they're so interested in criminalizing homelessness? Slavery never went away in America. It just went into the prison system. Understand that as long as those who are enslaved are in the prison system, they're allowed to be used as free labor because no one cares about them. Okay, the Constitution clearly does allow that, and that's the reality. Now, this decision is especially disastrous at a time where record numbers of Americans lack permanent housing. So we have an increasing homeless population because of several factors, mostly the inaffordability of homes. In fact, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, 11 million households that are spending more than a half of their income on rent, and a recent Harvard report points out that 38.1 million households are spending more than a third of their income on housing. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, anything upwards of the generally accepted standard of spending no more than 30% of gross income on rent and utilities is considered unaffordable housing. So you have, again, millions of households that are very close to becoming homeless. And that's it. Too many families in America in both categories are just one unexpected bill away from sliding into homelessness, according to the Alliance. So it's way too easy to find yourself in a situation where you no longer have a place to live. Now you might think, oh, come on, what kind of situation would happen to make you homeless? Well, medical debt. That's one thing that we have in America that doesn't exist in pretty much every other developed country. They don't have medical debt, but we do. One small study of 32 unhoused people across South Florida found that medical debt was their leading cause of their homelessness. They could not afford to pay their medical bills and their housing. And obviously, if you're racking up medical bills, you're not really able to work. Okay, so you have that as well. And so that's a double whammy. Mental health also affects about 20% of all Americans as of 2019, and the National Coalition for Homelessness says the general effects of various mental illnesses disrupt people's ability to carry out essential aspects of daily life, like work, as well as to make social bonds. This often results in pushing away caregivers, family, and friends who may be the force keeping that person from becoming homeless. So there's that. So there is mental illness. There's also the fact that wages are too low and the rent is too high, and that we have a medical care system that only reserves medical care for people who can afford it. This is the problem. These are many of the problems. But instead of trying to fix those issues, which are fixable, the court just decided it would be easier to make them all criminals, which actually, in the end, costs taxpayers more money than what it would take to actually get them into homes. But before I get into that, I want to address the cruelty aspect, right? How this is cruel and unusual. Justice Neil Gorsuch, who wrote for the majority, claimed that the court cannot say that the punishment grants past imposes here qualify as cruel and unusual. The city imposes only limited fines for first-time offenders, an order temporarily barring an individual from camping in a public park for repeat offenders, and a maximum sentence of 30 days in jail for those who later violate an order. Okay, now, odds are if you're stuck sleeping in a park because you don't have a place to go, a fine isn't going to do much to dissuade you because sleep is a biological necessity. You can't just choose not to sleep, okay? So, you know, you're going to end up falling asleep somewhere. And if you do, oh, you were sleeping in public, here's a fine for you, which you're not really going to be able to do a whole lot about because the whole reason that you were likely homeless to begin with is because you can't afford to stay somewhere. This is going to end up making your life that much worse. So, you bar an individual from sleeping in a public park. Well, guess what? They're still going to end up sleeping somewhere in public, which means they're going to get the maximum sentence of 30 days in jail, which is going to have an effect on their criminal record. It's going to make them even more unemployable. It's just going to create just more and more criminals, okay, technically criminals, which is going to exacerbate this homelessness condition in the first place. It's going to make life that much worse and so much harder to get out of this negative cycle. Now, the next part, again, leads me to Justice Sonia Sotomayor's opinion on this. Writing for the minority, quote, "Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. For people with no access to shelter, that punishes them for being homeless. That is unconscionable and unconstitutional." Exactly. This is prison for poverty. That's it. If you're poor, you can't afford a home, well, I guess you're just going to go to jail then, and you're going to become a permanent slave to the state. It makes me think about the, I'm a nerd, right? So I think about the Deep Space Nine episode where the government essentially, around this time, stuffed poor people into what they called sanctuary districts. Walled off areas where poor people, people without jobs, whatever, are just shoved in there and left to fend for themselves, hidden from the rest of society. They are essentially open air prisons. We're not there yet, but decisions like this, I mean, it makes me think that we are definitely on the road to creating something like this, because there end up in the series there were so many people that ended up not being able to have jobs or having mental illness and things like that, being put on the street and then getting stuffed into those districts. Now we have a similar situation that is developing. A better solution here is to actually give people homes, places to stay. Now, that costs far less than doing what we're doing right now. In fact, it actually costs taxpayers $31,065 a year to criminalize a single person suffering from homelessness through the enforcement of unconstitutional anti-panhandling laws, hostile architecture, like the spikes and bars and stuff put on benches, police raids of homeless encampments, and just general harassment. $31,000 a year per person. Okay? How much does it cost to provide them supportive housing? $10,051 a year. So, yeah, you 3 times as much. Wow. The idea of giving people's homes is also supported by many different organizations, including the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, which is the only government agency solely tasked to end homelessness, which makes sense. You end homelessness by giving people homes. I know, crazy, right? A December 2020 study by the Blue Cross Foundation also defended the idea of giving homeless people homes as a cost-effective solution. Why aren't we doing that? It goes back to our political will, our mentality. Remember, we see punishment, poverty as a punishment that should be given to people. or that people somehow deserve to be homeless, deserve to be poor. They made bad decisions, so let them suffer. That's the reality. That's what we're doing with these punitive laws. Instead of fixing the issue, we're just saying, screw you guys. You deserve it. You deserve to be homeless. And by the way, now that you are homeless and you made bad decisions, we're going to make it infinitely harder for you to pick your life back up and to make better decisions. Because how does any of this, criminalizing homelessness, actually help to make homeless people be able to pick themselves up and get, back into the economy and to rebuild their lives? It doesn't. It makes it much, much harder. It traps them in a cycle of poverty. It traps them in a cycle of imprisonment and forces them essentially to be free labor for corporations and for the state, because that's what happens to people who are now in the prison system who can't get out. And that's what's going to continue to happen to the people that end up getting stuck in here. Again, for something like medical bills or, having mental illness that is untreated, that is not affordable to treat. That's what's going on here. We can afford to help homeless people, but instead what we're doing is the opposite of what they need. We're making them a permanent underclass of people who are going to be exploited by companies for cheap prison labor. And I think that at the end of the day, this is about as cruel and dystopian as a policy as you can get. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.